911. What's the address?
My wife.
We're there to help you. Tell me why you think she's dead.
She's in the bathroom. Oh my God. Upstairs in the bathroom.
She's upstairs in the bathroom? Okay, upstairs in the bathroom. Let's go. Send in medical. Central 2307, send in medical.
So no heartbeat, no nothing? Secure the scene, don't touch anything.
Okay.
She was completely naked. Her head was slumped forward. It appeared that she had a single gunshot inside of her mouth.
There was a firearm next to her in the tub as well as a shell casing.
Dan, I'm Deputy Wheeler. I'm sorry to inform you, but your wife is passed, sir.
No.
Dan Howard, he was a police officer for many years, had been on Idaho State Police SWAT team.
Everybody loved Kendi. She was a mother, she was a grandmother, and everybody knew her as this really nice, warm person.
And ultimately the coroner, even with that gunshot, ruled there was not enough information to determine whether or not it was a suicide or homicide.
Oh, it wasn't a slam dunk at all.
This is the bad night I don't wish on anybody.
It was going to be a long process to get resolved.
Your wife is in a bar, you said she's unresponsive?
This is what he's going to tell you.
How to get out of that situation.
And I grabbed the gun.
Trying to find the first place to put a body.
No, sir.
The only thing they could do was kill him.
You want to say anything? We, the jury, and to find the defendant.
I had a call from my daughter, Kendi Howard. She called in a panic and they're getting a divorce, and it didn't sound very good out there.
The Kootenai County Sheriff's deputies received a 911 call for a welfare check at the Dan and Kendi Howard residence.
Sheriff's office! Hi, are you Kennedy?
Yeah.
Hi, Kennedy. I'm Deputy Traw. We got a call from, I believe, a friend of yours. Do you mind if we come in and talk to you?
They find Daniel Howard seated on the couch, acting like nothing is going on.
You must be Mr. Howard. Daniel?
Yep.
Do you go by Mr. Howard or Daniel? Yeah. Or Dan, I guess. Yeah. All right. You mind if we talk to you guys really quick?
Sounds fine to me.
All right.
Can I get a bag and then and so I can go?
Yeah. Do you mind if I follow you? It's just a safety thing. I just don't know where you're going is all. And Kennedy, correct?
They take Kendi upstairs. It's quiet. She's barely speaking above a whisper. Very chilling.
So your friend and or mom is kind of concerned about you. I'm not sure who called us is all, but what's going on today?
I asked for a divorce and he just called me not taking it.
Okay.
I can't say what I was going to do. I just want to leave.
Okay.
At some point while Dan was out of town working, she reconnected with a gentleman she grew up with, had an affair with him.
And it was on that night that Kendi told him for the first time face to face, we're getting a divorce. I've met with the divorce attorney. This is happening. She's not trying to create this big event. She's just trying to get out of there.
What did you mean by you can't tell me what he was going to do?
I just want.
Okay. All right. Well, we're here to help, but we need to make sure.
Kendi was not completely cooperative with the deputies that morning. She shared some information, but mainly she just wanted them to stand by while she packed a bag.
I don't want him.
I get that, but when your safety is in question, it's not causing problems, it's protecting yourself, right?
And they had talked through things, and she had texted a friend of hers, and her friend asked, how's he taking it? And Kendi responded, not good. Very early that morning, She woke up to Dan standing over her, wearing dark clothing, wearing black gloves. He may have had a pillow in his hand, and she would later describe that he had a look in his eyes that she had never seen, and she believed that he was going to kill her.
Alright. Has anything like this happened before?
Yeah, we've had problems.
Anything like tonight?
That's what I see now.
Okay.
First time I got that.
Kendi and Dan Howard had been married for some 28 years. They had a son together and a daughter from Kendi's previous marriage. It was not the first time sheriff's deputies had been called to the Howard home.
They had an extremely toxic relationship. He was very abusive toward Kendi Howard, mentally, emotionally, physically at times.
Dan had been a decorated member of the Idaho State Police, but he lost his job after an earlier series of incidents involving a neighbor he suspected who was having an affair with Kendi.
At least one occasion, Dan Howard pointed his AR-15 rifle at the neighbor, and another time, Dan Howard, while in uniform on duty with the Idaho State Police, drove to the neighbor's place of employment, where he confronted him, threatened to splatter his brains across the wall. As a result of that investigation, Dan Howard was terminated from the Idaho State Police, and he was convicted of numerous crimes.
He received probation, which was against the recommendation of the state. I think the office at that time certainly viewed him to be a unpredictable and therefore potentially dangerous person.
All right.
I know what I see. I know what he was going to do.
What do you think he was going to do?
I just went out of spirit. I just want to say
I know, man, but I'd like to know what you think he was going to do, because it helps me out too, right? To see which direction I need to go. And who knows, it might help him out too.
Oh, that is.
Do you think he was going to hurt himself?
No. Go ahead.
Do you think he was going to kill you? Okay. And why do you think that, ma'am?
There's no mandatory arrest policy. You know, they did not feel that equated to probable cause to make an arrest.
You can't arrest somebody for a look in their eyes, right?
She mentioned she thought she saw you standing over her. When she woke up, you were just standing right beside her. Did that ever happen? When I was sitting? Okay. Closer than usual, further than usual? Because something happened for us to get called, right? And a normal argument doesn't typically.
I never touched her. We didn't even raise our voices ever.
Okay.
Many of the individuals that we have spoken with that knew Dan as a law enforcement officer described him as someone who was narcissistic, someone who believed himself to be very smart.
She thinks I'm really smart.
I don't know. Have you ever had that thought before?
I don't have the balls to do that. And that would be psychological. And a selfish thing to do. I've been too many of those calls.
But you understand in our profession it's not uncommon either.
So Kendi was able to leave the house with the assistance of the sheriff's deputies. She drove down to her parents' home. I think Kendi Howard saw this as an opportunity to start over somewhere new. Kendi was not only happy but excited. She was in love again with someone she'd known since she was a kid. They had been making plans and arrangements for a future together.
Later that day, Dan apologized to Kendi and asked her to change her mind about the divorce. And then sent a photo of them in better times. Kendi told her parents she would briefly go back.
They begged her. They begged her to not go back. But she had an eye appointment she needed to keep. They hadn't finalized the divorce papers. She needed to put notice in at her job.
And she even told her family, well, he's not going to do anything now that he's been caught. I should be fine. Well, she wasn't fine.
What's the address? 911. What's the matter? Tell me where you're at.
She shot herself.
Okay, take a deep breath for me. Take a deep breath.
The night of February 2nd, Dan calls 911 to report that he found Kendi in the bathtub and that she had a gunshot wound in her mouth and that she had killed herself.
When you're there to help you, tell me why you think she's dead.
She's in the bathroom. Oh my God.
Before I even got on scene, we were concerned about this particular call, just because of our knowledge and history of Dan Howard.
Come on out! Come on out, sir. Over here, come on.
He appeared to be upset, covering his face a lot with his hands, a lot of crying type sounds that were coming from him.
Stay out here, okay?
Somebody stay with him.
Where's she at?
Upstairs in the bathroom.
She's upstairs in the bathroom? Okay, upstairs in the bathroom. Let's go.
Good butt.
I'll do it.
Send in medical.
Yep. Central 2307, send in medical.
No heartbeat.
So no heartbeat, no nothing. Secure the scene. Don't touch anything.
Okay.
She was clearly deceased.
Even though there's blood in the tub, there doesn't appear to be very much blood in the tub.
Yeah, we did see a weapon. There was a small .380 caliber semi-automatic handgun that was in the bathtub to the right of her body, and between her legs was a spent bullet casing.
Hey Dan, I'm Deputy Wheeler. I'm sorry to inform you, but your wife has passed, sir.
No.
We were in the residence from like midnight all the way until probably 9-something in the morning.
I got my condolences. That's just a bad night. I don't wish on anybody. So what was going on tonight?
Well, yeah. I have marital problems.
Mm-hmm.
And wanted to finalize.
Is this divorce has already been decided, or is it?
No,
it's open for discussion.
About her. She wants a divorce one day, she doesn't the next.
Howard told the detectives that he and Kendi had argued that night about the house she planned to buy when she left him.
The problem with that is he's trying to get us to believe she got so upset over this house that she didn't even own.
And then once she realized that all assets are going to be split, well, she flipped her shit.
And according to Dan, she got very upset and said this was BS, and she stormed upstairs to go take her nightly bath.
I heard something hit the floor, I guess. Didn't sound like a shot. I didn't think it was a shot. and down there watching TV, drank a beer. Well, I guess I lost track of time.
And he said after about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, he went upstairs and he found Kendi deceased in the bathtub.
Did she ever make any statements that had you concerned about her well-being?
Yeah, about every day. Well, it's just, she's so emotional.
Not one single person we spoke to during this investigation, not one person did they ever indicate that Kendi was depressed, suicidal. It was the opposite.
Yeah, sit down for me for a second.
I mean, I don't have to tell you. You've been in this job long enough. You know as well as we do. So I'm gonna plain out ask you. Did you shoot your wife?
No. This conversation is going to be over if we keep this line up.
You know we got to ask the question.
The two detectives that were interviewing Dan were very experienced detectives, and they knew Dan, and so they kind of backed off a while, tried to remain objective. They wanted Dan to tell his side of the story.
So I've been dealing with this roller coaster emotional thing.
So are you?
I wish I know it was this bad.
And then he also had 2 phone calls with Brooke, who was Kendi's biological daughter.
What? What are you talking about?
From across the room, I could hear her extremely upset, emotional, accusing Dan of killing Kendi, her mom.
She just accused you of this? No. Let's see what it sounded like. Dan, I was across the room and I could hear her.
Oh, I know.
She's angry.
Yep. She's angry.
Why would your daughter think you did this? What in the world would give her that impression?
There's no way in the world she believed Mom would want to commit suicide. Kids don't want to believe their moms would do it.
Well, they also don't want to believe that their dad would do it.
Yeah.
And at one point, Dan actually got up and
I'll be honest with you, I was not expecting that.
Me neither.
got away from me and moved from the living room area into the corner of the kitchen with his back to me.
Dan, why does your daughter think you killed your wife?
I have no idea.
Because I gotta tell you, that phone call puts chills down my spine.
You people.
You did it, didn't you, Dan?
No, I didn't.
I didn't think so, but now, after listening to that, I think you did, didn't you?
How the hell? She doesn't know. She wasn't here.
That was really the first moment I saw what I recognized to be some true emotion from Dan. Mostly panic.
Huh.
Throughout the evening, we just continued to try to lock Dan Howard into a story.
And I've got to ask again. I'm going to ask you this, and it's going to make you mad at me. And you know the deal. If you're in my shoes, you would ask it too.
Won't touch her.
And did you have anything to do with your wife's death?
No. Well, besides pissing her off downstairs.
He plays his cards very close to his chest. He's certainly not friendly, nor is he wanting to really volunteer much.
Dan, another thing I got to bring up to you is, you know, obviously you're distraught, you're upset. You've been sobbing throughout the night, right? But there's no tears coming out.
She should have been worried. My mouth is dry.
Well, I'm sure it is.
There were so many inconsistencies with what Dan was telling us and what we were slowly finding and observing at the scene. He had freshly stained deodorant stains on his t-shirt, which indicated he had just put that shirt on, even though he said he'd been wearing those clothes all day. One of the other things that we had learned is that one of the deputies videotaped and photographed the washer and dryer in the basement.
So by looking at the video, I could see how much time was left behind on the dryer, that the time that the dryer was started was within a minute of the 911 call. And so if he is so upset, if he's so distraught, but he had the presence of mind to move laundry over and start the dryer.
I asked Dan if there was any reason why he would have any gunshot residue on his person. Dan paused and gave me an extremely dirty look. And after a long pause, he says, well, yeah, I shot a gun today when I got back.
I shot my 40 today, but I showered.
When I took that pistol and started processing it, not only was the pistol clean, there was no evidence that it had been fired, no sooting, and when we did go to collect his gunshot residue swab, he immediately stuck his hands in his pocket and began scrubbing them around in kind of a to and fro fashion before he would put his hands out. That's evidence that he's trying to cover up something.
Once Howard's lawyers showed up, the questioning stopped.
There was no charges at that point. Unless you have a confession that there's been a murder, there has to be an autopsy.
And the results were not what the detectives expected.
Coroner ruled Kendi Howard's death to be undetermined.
Meaning it could have been a murder, but it also could have been a suicide.
It wasn't a slam dunk at all. It was going to be one that was going to be a long process to get resolved.
The longer time went by after her death, I think he started getting more and more comfortable.
And a lot of people thought that it had been a suicide, but law enforcement knew better.
Detectives were focused on why there was less blood in the bathtub than to be expected from a gunshot wound through the mouth.
If Kendi Howard would have been alive when she was shot, she would have bled profusely. The tongue is a muscle made up of lots and lots and lots of veins and arteries. She would have been spraying blood out of her mouth.
And the trajectory of the bullet into Kendi's mouth also didn't add up.
She had a single gunshot wound, which was intraoral and a slightly downward angle. Most intraoral gunshot wounds by suicide are in an upward position. It only makes sense, right, that if someone's going to shoot themselves in the head, they want that bullet to go into their brain, not down. Hers was down. We were convinced that Dan Howard had killed Kendi and then staged her death to look like a suicide.
She was covered from head to toe in bruises across her body, bruises that would have been the result of blunt force trauma. The state's theory of the case was that at some point he asphyxiated her using a carotid restraint. It was a technique that Dan would have been trained in as a law enforcement officer.
We also had witnesses come forward who said Dan Howard had bragged to them he could kill somebody and make it look like a suicide.
It took more than 2 years, but in the spring of 2023,
former ISP trooper is charged with murder and domestic battery in connection with the death of his wife back in 2021.
Daniel Howard was indicted for first-degree murder, with the prosecution fully aware there would be plenty of room for reasonable doubt as to whether it was a suicide or a murder.
I believe Dan thought he was going to get away with it.
Right now, a former Idaho State Police trooper from Athol is on trial for allegedly killing his wife 3 years ago. He claims she killed herself, and he found her in the bathtub.
It's not every day that you hear about an officer of the law being charged with murder, let alone the murder of his wife.
We'll turn now to opening statements. Second, go first.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Dan Howard moved to Idaho, became a deputy sheriff in Idaho County, and then in 1994 he became an Idaho State Trooper. He had the training, knowledge, and experience to be able to process crime scenes and collect evidence. Ladies and gentlemen, there are two sides to that coin. Having the ability to read a crime scene and collect evidence also gives you the ability to stage a crime scene and not leave evidence.
So our theory of the case was that Dan had killed her via asphyxiation and then shot her in the mouth to make it look like a suicide after the fact.
Why? What's the motive? Kendi was going to take half of everything in the divorce. $1 million. They have a house on 10 acres in Athol. They have toys. They have a tractor, vehicles, motorcycle, boat, camper, retirements. Each of them have their own retirements. A lot of cash. Hardly any debt.
Dan certainly believed that the things that they had, the nice things that they enjoyed, were the fruits of his labor.
Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence will come in and will demonstrate that this was not a suicide. There will also be evidence that this was a homicide. Ladies and gentlemen, evidence will show that Dan Howard is guilty of murder. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mortensen. Mr. Johnson, your opening.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Jason Johnson.
Howard's defense lawyer told the jury this was not a murder.
The body position, the mechanics, the gun placement is consistent with suicide. The gun had Kendi's blood on it, on one of the grips. It had her DNA on it, and another male's DNA. Dan was excluded from the gun. You'll hear that she is not content with her body. She is struggling with whether she wants to leave Dan even after everything went down. When you see all the evidence, and we have concluded this case, we'll be asking you to find the defendant not guilty.
So we had to prove this was homicide by proving it was not a suicide.
And prosecutors began with the people closest to Kendi, including the man with whom she was having an affair, Daniel Prado.
Did you know that Kendi was married at the time you began that relationship?
Yes.
During this period of time, Kendi's making plans. What was her general demeanor?
Or she was happy about moving forward, wanting to move forward, wanting to kind of move on.
Were there things in Kendi Howard's life that she was excited about, that brought her joy?
Absolutely. She wanted to move back to our hometown, to possibly start a little antique store, those types of things.
Was the idea of divorcing Dan stressful to Kendi?
It was.
What did she say?
She was, I would say, pretty terrified about how he was going to react when she told him.
No further questions?
Witness for the state.
Brooke Wilkins. Who was your mother?
Kendi.
You have opportunities to view Dan interact with your mother.
Yes.
Was there a difference in the way that Dan treated your mother in public and how he treated her in the privacy of your home?
100%.
How would Dan treat Kendi out in public?
Lovingly.
What about at home?
It was different at home.
Did you ever hear Dan speak to your mom in a way that wasn't kind?
Yes, often.
What kinds of things would you hear Dan say?
He would call her fat, a whore, stupid, dumb Indian, a slut, a bitch.
Were these things that you heard with greater frequency closer to her death?
Yes.
She certainly described a two-faced Dan who put forth this idea that they were that all-American family. And so having Kendi leave him would disrupt that image that he had worked hard to portray. Brooke, did there come to be a time where you found out that your mother was dead?
Yes.
How did you find out that your mother mother was dead?
Dan got a hold of me.
What did Dan say?
He maintained that she shot herself. I asked him what did he do, and I told him I know that she wouldn't do that. She would not have shot herself.
Did you yell at him?
Yes,
Did you attend the funeral?
I did.
Did a lot of people attend the funeral?
They did.
Did Dan attend the funeral?
He did not.
Judge, actually what we'd like to do is publish 12A and D if the court's okay with that.
Certainly. They dimmed the lights for what the prosecution hoped would be its most powerful piece of evidence, the questioning of Daniel Howard the night of Kendi's death.
So what was going on tonight?
Including what happened after that angry phone call with Kendi's daughter, Brooke.
I gotta tell you, that phone call put chills down my spine.
People.
You did it, didn't you, Dan?
No, I didn't.
Can you describe the conversation for us to the best of your memory?
She was angry, she was upset, and she immediately accused Dan of killing her mother. As my testimony continued, I don't think he could help himself. And he was staring at me the entire time. He was angry. It was something he couldn't control.
On cross-examination, Howard's lawyer tried to get the detective to admit he had jumped to conclusions.
Now, when you overheard Kendi's daughter emotional on the phone, you accused Dan of killing his wife, correct?
Yes, I did.
That's when you made up your mind?
No.
No further.
The prosecution's final witness was a clinical psychologist, Philip Hanger.
The interviews, with the exception of that offered by her husband, Dan Howard, did not provide an indication of concern or risk of self-harm. This is not somebody who, in my impression, within a reasonable degree of psychological certainty, would be at imminent risk for suicide.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Cross-examination, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Your Honor. She was having a secret affair, correct?
There is a reference in the witness statements that there was a relationship, yes, with Mr. Prado.
Ms. Howard was 48 years old when she passed. Menopause can have an effect on a person's emotions, correct?
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth?
The defense case was centered on the medical examiner, Dr. John Howard, no relation to Daniel Howard, who did not rule on suicide or homicide, but was certain the cause of Kendi's death was a gunshot wound, contradicting the prosecution's theory of the case.
I'm not going to say it was our only weakness, but the biggest weakness was that medical examiner's report.
And Dr. Howard stuck to his opinion even under a lengthy cross-examination.
So there's no amount of information that could have been provided to you that would have changed your opinion as to cause of death?
As I said, this has the same appearance of literally hundreds and hundreds of gunshot wounds that prove fatal in other cases that I've performed the autopsy. There's no reason for me to believe that there is any other cause of death.
Now the defense had to decide whether Daniel Howard would testify on his own behalf.
And Mr. Howard, I'm going to ask you some questions, okay? Do you understand that because the state has the burden of proof, the law does not require you to testify in order to win your case?
Yes.
I always believed that there was a possibility that he would testify. I think Dan is a smart person. It was always a question of whether he thought he could explain it away.
Have you made a decision as to whether you will testify at your trial?
Yes, sir.
What is your decision?
I'm not going to testify.
Closing arguments were set to begin after a 3-day weekend, with the prosecution team feeling good about the outcome.
Dan's trial was definitely not going well for him.
And Howard, out on bail, went home for what prosecutors were hoping would be his final weekend of freedom.
Okay, we have recess. Thank you all.
It's not common for someone charged with murder to be out on bail, but he had an ankle monitor.
Late on Sunday night, Daniel Howard was tracked heading out of town, out of state, to the nearest airport in Spokane, Washington, taking with him a gun.
A former Idaho State Police trooper was arrested last night at the Spokane International Airport, and he was booked into the jail as a fugitive trying to escape the region.
Thankfully, we had a surveillance team that had been watching Dan when he was not in court.
In court Monday morning, Howard's lawyer said it was just an innocent mistake.
Obviously, the media has covered extensively this alleged flight of Mr. Howard, who was following an individual who was there at the time of the arrest, returning a rental car.
The judge revoked Howard's bond but said the trial would continue as scheduled.
This time, you'll now hear closing arguments. The state will go first. You may proceed.
Who was Kenny Howard? Kenny Howard was fun. She was communicative and engaged in her life. She was moving towards a new future, a new life that was away from the financial, emotional, and psychological control of the defendant. This was not suicide. And the state showed you that this was not suicide because a dead person cannot shoot themselves in the mouth.
Counsel, you may give your closing argument.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is a tragedy, no matter how this pans out. Whether she committed suicide or not, that's for you to decide. We can feel sorry for the tragedy and miss her, but let's look at the facts and the evidence in this case of a murder or a staged suicide. Let's look at the scene. There's no sign of struggle anywhere else in the house. The scene is consistent with suicide. You don't have to put your stamp of approval on B. You don't have to like him as a father. You don't have to like him as a husband. Well, there's not a trial for that. Ladies and gentlemen, because you're finding a child.
I'm told that we have a verdict from the jury.
The deliberations had lasted more than 8 hours.
Mr. Howard, if you'd please rise. The clerk will read the jury's verdict.
Count 1 is the defendant Daniel C. Howard guilty or not guilty of domestic battery? Guilty.
When the jury found Dan guilty of felony domestic battery, I felt pretty confident they were going to find him guilty of murder.
But if they did, there was a choice of first or second degree murder, depending on whether they found premeditation.
Count 2 is the defendant Daniel C. Howard guilty or not guilty of murder in the first degree?
Your wife is passed, sir.
No!
Not guilty. Is the defendant Daniel Howard guilty or not guilty of second degree murder? Guilty.
It was a very good feeling. I could see the family, and they were relieved, and that's what mattered to me.
Brooke Wilkins.
Brooke, all right. Thank you. Go ahead.
All aspects of my life are different since Dan decided money and his ego were more important than my mom's life. Dan, I waited for that phone call for you to explain what had happened. That didn't come. You'll never understand the damage you have caused to all of us. You are not the victim. You deserve to be here today. You deserve to never again live a free life.
Thank you, Ms. Wilkins. Mr. Howard, this is your opportunity to tell the court anything you'd like me to know or consider before sentencing if you would like to.
Your Honor, I am excuse me for a second. I'm not that monster, I assure you, that people portrayed me to be. But Your Honor, is about the sentence in this family prison. And I love my wife. And I miss her. Words cannot describe the pain that I feel. My wife took her life. My will to live went down significantly. And when the jury found me guilty of crimes I didn't commit, walk down even further. Thank you, Your Honor. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. What the jury found, Mr. Howard, is that you murdered your wife, but they didn't find beyond a reasonable doubt the one element of premeditation. But what we know beyond a reasonable doubt is that you strangled your wife, you murdered her, and then you staged her naked body in the bathtub, shot her through the mouth, and tried to pass this off as a suicide. You killed somebody who brought a lot of life and light to those around her and those she touched. And you snuffed that out because of your own pride, greed, and anger. It's clear to me that you're a remorseless killer. And so I do find that a fixed life sentence is appropriate for the count of murder in the second degree. On the domestic violence charge, I'll impose 10-year sentence and run it concurrent.
My only hope is that maybe there's a small piece of justice for Kendy's family. I think the message is if you are in an abusive relationship, you need to get out.